Thank you very much. There's still people out there. I'm happy. It's late, it's a long day, and I know that there's a reception waiting, but I'll get through it as quickly as possible. Yes, that's me. I've been working in payment for 25 years for the company called Cryptera. We have been manufacturing encrypting PIN pads and secure card readers, now also NFC readers. And actually the PIN pad started long before PCI ever existed. It was back in the 1980s that we created the first encrypting PIN pad. Today we use the experiences from the key management also to help others make key management not just in payment but also in other lines of electronic equipment. This presentation will cover the scope of the PCI PIN security requirements. We will discuss a bit about how to set up a provisioning facility that is compliant with these requirements. This is provisioning of devices. We will discuss user roles involved in that, how to set up the procedures, and also something about key operations like key import-export procedures and audits and certification. So, I think everybody in the room knows that when they use a point of interaction terminal, I'll call it a terminal, or a banking machine, you need to enter your PIN. In some cases anyway, depending on amounts, and so in the ATM it's always the case. And everybody knows that some encryption happens inside this device to secure your PIN when it goes to the payment server in order to be verified. But what has been done to establish these keys? They don't sort of just appear in these devices. There's some work to be done before the keys are present in the devices. So let's dig a little bit deeper in this, and this is some of the methods that can be used to load the pins in the devices. A fairly old-fashioned method, which is still used a lot, especially in the ATMs, is that the host server provides key letters so that the key is split in two key parts, and two key custodians each get a key part and enters this on the PIN pad, and inside the PIN pad they are combined again in order to give the original key. That's a very, you could say, basic way of doing it. And if anybody is wondering, it's not a requirement that it's a man and a woman. There is no gender qualification for being a key custodian. It's probably more important that you're trustworthy. That's you could say, an important thing. I also heard somebody saying, okay, but this means that each of these custodians know half of the key. And in fact, they don't. They don't know anything about the key. They know a key part, but these two key parts are completely random, but put together, they get the key. And for anybody that doubts that, I mean, that's not for mathematicians probably, but then we can later at the cocktail party, we can create a small experiment to show how that actually works. Another way of loading the keys is through the remote key loading facility. This could be TR34, which is one of the standards for how to load this. This is a very complex drawing, so I won't go into details with all of it. But those of you familiar with public cryptography can see that the PIN pad comes equipped with an asymmetric key pair, a private key and a public key, and it also has a certificate where the public key has been signed by a certification authority. And this means that if the host knows that public key of that authority, it can fetch this certificate, and it can actually verify that it comes from a genuine EPP, and it can use the public key to encrypt the key that it needs to send to the to the EPP, which will then end up in the ATM with the right key. So don't worry about all the details, but some of you will know exactly how that works. And there's also another possibility, and this is mainly used in these point of interaction, the terminals, the payment terminals we know from the shops. They are often based on derived unique key per transaction, DOCPOT. And this means that the terminal is loaded, needs to be loaded with an initial key, an IK, and a related serial number, and then it changes the key for every transaction. In order to get that key in, one popular method is that the key injector that has the HSM with the keys share a key with the terminal manufacturer. This is this key generation key. And based on information from the terminal, it creates a unique key for each terminal that is loaded in the terminal. Here on the host side, if it knows the same key and fetches the serial number, it can generate the same key exchange key, that's the KEK part there, and it means that it can load the IK encrypted with this key, and we get the key securely transported into the terminal. This facility is used by many key injectors for the DOCPOT scheme. So all in all, we have shown here 3 different ways of getting the key from an HSM somewhere into the terminal on site. There can be combinations of these. You can also load the DOCPOT keys using RKL, but basically there are several methods for this. Typically what you're loading is a master key, and once the master key is in the terminal, it will be exchanged at regular intervals between transactions by loading a session key, and this is then encrypted by the master key. This is true for all ATMs, that they follow that concept, whereas point of sales or point of interaction terminals usually use the DOCPOT method, which means that they themselves generate the next key that is needed in the transaction. So how do we get the newborn terminal provisioned with the information that it needs in order to perform this key load later on? A newborn is sensitive. There's no firmware in it, so it can't really protect itself. So we load some firmware, we load some encryption keys, we give it an identity, a serial number, and perhaps the place we are loading this, we also have an HSM with some keys that use this serial number to generate more keys that are loaded into the terminal, and this is done where it is manufactured. It may also create a key pair inside, an asymmetric key pair that is sent to a CA for signing so that it can get a certificate. This is what is needed if we were using the remote key loading features that I described previously. So that's how that gets into the terminal before the keys, the final keys are then later loaded. So all in all, we have a provisioning state where we are loading information into the newborn terminal. We have a key injection state where the information we load here are used to load the keys that are used in the operational state. So this was where we started. We had the keys in the terminals, and the other story there is how they got there. And all this is covered in the PCI PIN security requirements. So all steps of this, actually it covers all of it, whereas the PCI PTS covers the terminal security, all the physical security of the terminal, but the PCI PIN covers all these processes that are needed in order to get the keys fitted in the terminals. So now I'll talk a little bit about how to do this actual provisioning. And there's many ways of doing this. What I'm describing is one solution. There could be many others. It will depend on what existing processes you have for manufacturing the terminals and devices. It also depends on how big is your volume. You might have some procedures that are simplified if you have few devices. It depends on who owns the keys that you are injecting. What are the rules of the payment processors that are going to use these terminals? And there's lots of things that can influence how you're actually doing it. But the way we have done it is we have started to create a restricted area. We have alarm systems, we have video surveillance, we have access control. We have created, so you could say, a task list or a procedure with all the steps that you need to go through in order to get the keys loaded into the terminal, all the processes that has to be done. All these tasks are assigned to different roles in your personnel in the company where you're doing this, so that each role, there could be more than one person being able to do each specific role, because otherwise you would be sort of out of business if somebody was on holiday or sick for a week. So it's good to define more persons on each role. And all this is collected in an elaborate set of instructions and procedures on how to do this and how to load the keys into the terminals. So the PCI PIN, one of the fundamental elements in that is that that everything that has to do with security is based on split knowledge and dual control. So this means that in all these sensitive operations, you have two roles involved. And in our system, we call them Security Officer 1 and Security Officer 2. And one single person can never be in both of these groups. Of course, they are separate. You have to stay in the group you are in because you get information in one group that would compromise security if you had the information from the other group. But these persons go into the high security area and they work on the HSM where they can set up the configurations for the various products that are going to be produced. Then there's an operational function, and there could be more of those because that's where the volume is. That's where the terminals is going through, and you are actually connecting the terminal to the system and loading the keys and configurations that are used for that specific terminal. And on top of that, that's drawn in the bottom, but in fact, when I say on top, it's sort of overviewing everything, is some supervisory functions. Some people that are not allowed to have the roles of any of the other roles because they are checking that things are working according to the procedures that are set up. So, yeah. We have chosen to split the system in two restricted areas in order to make it practical. So we have a high security area where we have alarm service, video surveillance, and access control. And the access control is check in, check out. So you have to check out as well, so we always know who is in the room. And you can only get in if you have the SO1 and SO2 or at least two split roles. So there can only be two persons in there at the same time. So this is where all the HSM work to set up the keys, to set up the specific configurations for a terminal that has to be delivered to a specific payment system. There's also in the room utilities to support that we can import and export keys from other entities through key letters. Key letters works in the same way as we described when we were doing manual key load, that the key is split into two key parts. And the first part comes as a key letter to one security officer 1, for instance. Only when that is secured in the secure room, you are allowed to send the second part from the sending party to get the second half of the key that gets into the secure room. And the two key officers will go in together and they will type in the information on the key letters and generate the key in the HSM. And this is how you import a key. Export, you need a printer because you need to print key letters and send out. And all this happens in some tamper-evident envelopes and serial numbers on the envelopes and all that kind of thing. The administration that is what I've just mentioned, that they go in and they can also, sometimes they need to generate new keys. So the HSM does true random key generation. They can do signing of certificates. If we had this situation with the remote key loading, they could go in and sign a host certificate so that it could be loaded in EPPs in order to say you are allowed to work with this specific host. And they can also sign and encrypt the firmware that needs to go into the terminal. These are operations that happens in the high security area. And then the key import-export, as we just discussed. Outside the high secure area, we have a secure area. And actually, there's no clear text keys in the secure area, but it is still secure because it is the place where the terminals that are going to be provisioned are passing through this area, and a number of operators are actually connecting this terminal in order to get it loaded with the firmware and the keys that it needs. One of the first tasks to do is that the operator needs to verify that this newborn terminal is actually genuine and that it doesn't look like anybody has tampered it, and that they know that it has been sealed in production, so it is a genuine terminal. The system is set up again so that each operator identifies themselves, and we have chosen to do that with a token and a fingerprint so that we know who is doing the provisioning. And there's always two operators in the secure room that has signed on. Otherwise, the high secure area will not give out the keys that loads into the terminals. And the supervising part, we have these personnel that look at the video log from the surveillance cameras. They look at the logs from the access control and the alarm, has there be any abnormalities, and they create a report at frequent intervals, or if there's something that has happened, it can be discovered, and different mitigating procedures could be put in place. And then once every second year, the whole system has to be evaluated against PCI PIN. And we have a visit from an auditor that inspects the secure facilities. The auditor will review the audit logs from the supervising people. It will review the reports and the audit logs, and it will review the instructions and maybe interview personnel in order to check that they know what they're doing. And any remarks, of course, must be addressed and corrected, and there are procedures for that as well. And in the end, if you get through all this, you get an attestation of compliance that your secure provisioning facility is PCI PIN compliant. So, the takeaways. PCI PIN covers the whole payment system, really, because everywhere where there's keys, that protects. It started with pins, but actually now there's also card data involved. PCI there's actually multiple steps that has to be taken in order to make sure that the keys are present in the terminal, and all these has to be done securely. The provisioning setup must ensure the integrity of the point of interaction terminal before it is provisioned, so that you don't provision something which has been tampered. And the administrator setup must be able to support secure key import and export, because you'll be working with other bodies that have keys that you may need to use in the operation. So, establishing and maintaining a secure facility is not a trivial thing. There's a lot of steps to be taken care of. Thank you very much.